Once long ago, when the history books had not yet been written, a wise ruler dreamed of a mighty dragon named Long. In the dream, Long showed him how two playing children were putting hulled and unhulled rice into a thick rice sieve that looked like a small table. This created beautiful patterns, and as more grains were pushed in, some fell at the other side. To free the sieve from the rice after the game, the children used a thin chopstick. The dragon demanded that the ruler use this principle to develop a game that was unsurpassed in variety and diversity. The game was to train the players' minds and lead them to wisdom. When the ruler awoke, he immediately hurried with long strides to the carpenter of his court and commissioned such a game. He came up with many variations and called this game Duòyáng, which means diversity. Soon almost everyone knew this game, and big tournaments were held in many countries. The few people who could reach the rank of Grandmaster at Duòyáng were rewarded by their wise ruler and received great prestige. You too can learn Duòyáng, win tournaments, and show the world what you are made of.
In the picture above you can see the rice sieve from two different side views. Below you can see the rules of the game, on which the rice sieve is shown in 3 different views. Although there are 585 variations in the game rules, they are very thin, clear, and have many pictures.
Duòyáng is Chinese and means diversity. The game has 585 variants, almost all of which build logically on each other. This is a world record in this game segment. Game accessories: 1 rice sieve with 8 continuous holes, 35 light and 35 dark rice grains, 1 chopstick, and the rules of the game. Above you can see the top of the rice sieve on the left, the bottom in the middle, and a side view on the right. In the bottom left corner you can see the rice sieve in cross section. There is 1 grain of rice in the left through hole. In the hole to the right there are 2 grains of rice. To the right, you can already see 3 grains of rice, with the lowest one sticking out of the rice sieve. There are also 3 grains of rice in the hole on the far left, and a 4th is pushed in. The lowest grain of rice would now fall out. Remember, if there are 3 grains of rice in one hole, the lowest one sticks out of the rice sieve. When a 4th grain of rice is pushed in, the lowest one falls out. Many game variants are based on this basic principle. A solo game variation to learn the game. Memorize your patterns. First, put any grain of rice into each unoccupied hole, forming a pattern that you can remember well. Each grain of rice must be flush with the surface of the sieve. Then form your second pattern on the entire surface with 16 grains of rice if there is already a grain of rice in each sieve hole. Then make a third pattern with 16 grains of rice. The top 3 pictures show 3 examples of simple patterns that you can put into the rice sieve one after the other from the top. When making the patterns, remember which pattern is now in which place in the rice sieve. Remember that the patterns move from top to bottom. When you have put the 3 patterns one after the other from top to bottom into the rice sieve, you should now know which pattern is visible on the bottom side. Now check if your guess is correct. The picture below on the left shows the correct solution. You can follow this principle for as many patterns as you like from top to bottom, and always check whether you can still remember the pattern on the bottom. When you have practiced enough, you can use the chopstick to remove all the grains of rice from the rice sieve. To do this, insert the chopstick from the top into a filled hole, press it down, and then pull it out from the bottom. Have fun with your first training game. Place the rice sieve on its 2 legs right between you. One player gets 35 dark grains of rice, the other 35 light grains. The long chopstick is placed ready. Draw lots to see who starts. The player with the dark rice grains takes one of his rice grains in one hand and puts both hands behind his back. There, the player may swap the grain of rice again into the other hand if he wants to. Now the player stretches both hands forward with clenched fists and the other player has to choose a hand. The player with the grain of rice must now open both fists. If the other player has chosen the empty hand, he or she may begin. Otherwise, the player with the dark rice grains starts. Now each player takes turns to put one of the grains of rice flush from the top into any unoccupied hole of the sieve. Only when there is one grain of rice in each hole do the following rules apply. Each player takes it in turns to put their own grain of rice into the sieve from above. If another grain of rice falls out of the bottom of the sieve when you put your own grain of rice in, you have collected another grain of rice and you put it back. If one of your own grains of rice falls out of the bottom of the sieve during your own action, then you take it to yourself to continue playing. The first player to collect 7 foreign grains of rice wins the game. When a player has captured 7 grains of rice from his opponent, the game ends. Alternatively, the game can be played in such a way that the game ends when one player has captured 2 more grains of rice than the other. There are many other variations. When the game is over, all the grains of rice are removed from the rice sieve with the chopstick. Write the names of all the players on a sheet of paper in columns, as shown in the picture. The youngest player can now put any 3 grains of rice into the 4 middle holes of the rice sieve. He first puts 1 grain of rice into each of the 4 holes in a clockwise direction, then the second and finally the third. The other players watch very carefully and note the order of the rice grains. When the player has filled each of the 4 central sieve holes with 3 grains of rice, he must say to the next player in a clockwise direction which of the 4 filled holes he should put a grain of rice into from the rice supply. The player who has to stick the new grain of rice may choose the color of the grain of rice to stick. Before sticking the grain of rice, the player must predict the color of the grain of rice that will fall out of the bottom of the rice sieve as a result of his action. When the grain of rice falls out of the bottom, the player checks whether the prediction was correct. If so, the player gets 1 point under his name on the sheet of paper. To do this, simply draw a line under his or her name. If his prediction was wrong, he does not get a point. No minus point either. Now this player has to tell the next player in a clockwise direction in which hole to put a grain of rice from the rice supply and so on. Play continues in this way until one player has at least 3 points more than all of the others. If the game is too easy for you with 4 filled holes, you can increase the number of holes when preparing the game. This game already has several variants, but they are not mentioned here. The game was thoroughly tested by many friends, a senior residence, a preschool and a playgroup for children, teenagers and young adults. Surprisingly, children and older people were equal opponents. The individual variations were immediately understood and it became apparent that the game's repetition appeal was very high. It was astonishing that not only children immediately came up with variants themselves that actually existed in the rules of the game without people knowing about them beforehand. The staff members of the 3 different institutions were unanimous in their opinion that the game excellently trains 3-dimensional imagination, memory and dexterity. For these reasons, they rated the game as educationally valuable and also as an enriching leisure activity.
If you want to test the game, you can get a copy from me with English or German game rules for a test phase.